Under the shimmer of alien chandeliers, where glass-like wings of hovering drones cast fractured light, the banquet began in elegance and ended in poison. One moment, laughter carried through the chamber like rippling water. The next, Consul Viren's face went pale as porcelain, his body folding against the embroidered seat as venom tightened its grip on his veins. The goblet slipped from his hand and rolled across the polished floor, leaving a thin smear of wine and bile. Delegates rushed forward with cries and tongues both harsh and melodic. Yet their movements were hesitations wrapped in courtesy, as though fear itself was watching. The aliens called an accident. Humans did not. And so Earth did what it always did when tested. It broke its own seal. In the depths of a stasis vault, after centuries of frozen stillness, a pod cracked open with a hiss of vapor. A man stepped out, skin pale from the frost, eyes dark with something that had never thawed. His name was Kale Draven, revived not as an ambassador, not as a scholar, but as a soldier. He walked into the chamber like a shadow made flesh, boots striking the tiles with a weight that silenced conversations. When Kale spoke, his voice was deep and cold, measured as if every syllable had been forged rather than spoken. "You dragged me back for peace," he said, his eyes sweeping the hall. "Then you should have chosen another man. I was never peace. I was survival." A ripple passed through the assembly. Alien crests flickered, antennae quivered, scales shifted with unease. Even the translators seemed to stall, as though reluctant to carry such words across languages. On a throne of softened metal, Consul Viren stirred. Though weak, he tried to lift himself, his voice the opposite of Kale's. Warm, smooth, diplomatic, each phrase dipped in honey. "Earth sends only one man. That is either an insult or a warning." Kale's lips moved into something between a smile and a scar. Both. The reaction came like a wave. Some laughed nervously, some recoiled, yet all eyes fixed on him. In that instant, the true conflict began. The chamber divided not between factions or species, but between those who feared what a single human could mean and those who feared what would happen if he failed. Ambassador Tyron spoke next, his tone calm, his gaze sharp as a blade hidden in silk. His words carried nothing but control, designed to say less than they revealed. A tragedy, yes, but accidents are frequent in fragile bodies. To ignite conflict over spilled wine would be beneath this council's dignity. Kale's silence was heavier than rebuttal. He did not need words. His stillness accused more deeply than rhetoric. Delegates shifted in their seats, uneasy. Tyron's eyes flickered, just once, betraying a spark of calculation. The investigation began with fractured details. Records of the wine vanished from archives. The servants who poured it were suddenly missing. Witnesses claimed contradictions with confidence that smelled rehearsed. At every turn, threads unraveled into smoke. But Kale did not chase smoke. He watched, he listened, and when he laughed for the first time, it shook the chamber. The sound was not mirth, but thunder breaking in a cave, deep enough to rattle lungs. It came when an alien noble accused Earth of dramatizing events. Overreacting. Kale boomed, his voice layered with storm. "My consul drinks poison, and you call that a stumble? You mistake patience for weakness. Test it again." Silence followed like a blade pressed against every throat. No diplomat found courage to answer. And somewhere in that silence, fear began to bloom. At night, whispers crawled through the station's metal corridors. "He eats strange food, heated in glowing boxes. He speaks of warriors from a place called Florida. He mentioned Chuck Norris and then winked. No one knows who that is, but all who heard felt dread. Others spoke of duct tape, the human adhesive that bound assassins tighter than chains. It should not hold, one guard whispered, and yet it does. But it was not food or tape or strange names that unnerved them most. It was the way Kale's face carried both certainty and fear. It was the way he seemed less a man revived than a secret released, as if buried truths now walked with him. Consul Viren, recovering in private chambers, looked upon his human guardian with both gratitude and sorrow. He smiled, even as the poison gnawed at him, trying to extend diplomacy with every breath. Yet when the doors closed and the chamber emptied, the smile would fade, his trembling hands betraying the fractures beneath. He wanted harmony, but harmony itself had been poisoned. Ambassador Tyron grew bolder. Your human disturbs the council, he murmured with silk-sheathed contempt. He brings thunder where there should be balance. Perhaps Earth does not understand diplomacy. Kale stepped forward then, his boots echoing like verdicts. His eyes met Tyron's, unblinking, unflinching. Perhaps you should stop hiding behind silk, Ambassador. Gasps swelled in the chamber. Delegates leaned back as though struck. Even Viren, fragile in his chair, lifted a hand in plea. Peace, Kale. We must preserve harmony. But Kale did not yield. His silence after the consul's words was its own defiance. He knew harmony without justice was surrender, and he carried no patience for surrender. It was not long before someone tried to end him. The assassin's blade never reached his throat. Kale's hand closed around the wrist, breaking bone with a twist that sounded like snapping branches. He did not kill the would-be murderer. Instead, he bound him with duct tape and dragged him before the council. This, Kale said, voice sharp as carved obsidian, is what peace looks like when you let lies go unchallenged. The delegates recoiled at the sight of the writhing alien bound in sticky silver strips. Murmurs rose. Horror at the brutality, confusion at the material, fear at the ease. One guard muttered, "What is this substance? It should not hold." Kale's expression was unreadable. "That's duct tape. We don't understand it either. But it works." The alien assassin began to cry. The chamber, filled with the smells of fear and adhesive, erupted in dissonant noise. Some demanded answers. Some demanded Kale's restraint. But all of them realized something they had not before. Earth had sent only one man, and already the balance of the galaxy trembled. Consul Viren, pale but alive, whispered with cracked voice, "Earth sends him alone, not because they lack armies, but because they fear what happens if he is not contained." Ambassador Tyron's eyes narrowed, calculating. He spoke little, but his silence said more than arguments could. He had underestimated the soldier. He would not do so again. That night, Kale stood alone on the station's balcony, stars burning like frozen embers beyond the glass. He breathed the thin, alien air and let the silence rest heavy in his chest. The consul slept in pain, the council whispered in fear, and the ambassador plotted in shadows. Kale did not smile. He did not rest. He simply waited, a storm coiled inside a human frame. And so, dear listener, here is the truth the chamber learned but could not name. Humanity does not need armies to shake empires. Sometimes we only need one person, walking from silence, carrying secrets that cannot be buried. Remember this: strength is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move through it. Survival is not granted, it is claimed. And peace, when it comes, is never given freely. It is earned in thunder. The council chamber was dressed in ritual silence, walls shimmering with symbols of peace that now felt like lies etched in gold. Delegates gathered not to celebrate, but to accuse, their voices sharpened by fear and suspicion. At the heart of the circle, Kale Draven stood with the assassin bound in silver strips of duct tape, the alien's trembling body living proof of betrayal. No chains, no steel, no plasma could hold so securely as this strange human invention. The sight made some laugh nervously, others whisper in unease. It was not the assassin's confession they feared most. It was the soldier who dragged him here. Ambassador Tyron rose slowly, his composure unshaken, his every gesture an act of control. A desperate creature will say anything to escape punishment. Shall we condemn an ambassador based on the word of one already guilty? That would be chaos, not justice. His voice was smooth, deliberate, built to persuade, but it carried a shadow of defiance, as though daring anyone to doubt him. Kale did not step forward yet. He let silence stretch, a weight pressing down upon the chamber. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, carrying a gravity that seemed older than the war itself. He didn't speak to escape punishment. He spoke because he feared what I might do if he didn't. Gasps rippled through the hall. The delegates shifted in their seats, some recoiling at the bluntness, others leaning forward in morbid fascination. Kale's words were not diplomacy. They were the sound of raw truth dragged into daylight. Consul Viren, still weak but determined to project dignity, raised his trembling hand. His face was pale, but his tone retained its soft music. We must weigh evidence, not fear. Kale, if there is more, present it now. From within his jacket, Kale drew a shard of black crystal, edges glowing faintly as though it carried the residue of a buried sun. Murmurs filled the chamber as he placed it on the Consul's pedestal. This was sealed with me, Kale said. Data older than your treaties, older than the false smiles you wear today. Records of poison shipments, contracts with shadows, names written in venom. Earth buried me with it because they knew one day the mask would slip and the galaxy would see the face beneath. The shard lit, streaming fragments of history across the walls. Images of clandestine meetings, coded agreements, the same symbols repeating. Tyron seal. For a moment, the entire chamber breathed as one, caught between outrage and terror. Ambassador Tyron did not flinch. He simply folded his hands behind his back, eyes glittering like a predator's. Forgeries. Clever ones. How convenient that the evidence comes from a relic who has been asleep longer than memory. Who can prove this is real? His words were steady, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly, and Kale's eyes caught the tremor. You can, Kale said softly, and the words cut like a blade. Deny it, and you brand yourself liar. Admit it, and you brand yourself traitor. Either way, the mask is gone. The chamber erupted. Delegates rose, shouting in voices layered with static, demanding answers, some calling for arrest, others for restraint. Consul Viren's face twisted with pain, his hand clutching at his chest as the poison in his veins awakened with the stress. Guards rushed forward, and chaos spilled like water over stone. It was then Tyron struck, not with words this time, but with action. A signal burst from his wristband, and hidden soldiers stormed the chamber, armored and armed, their weapons gleaming with lethal promise. Screams filled the hall as delegates ducked and shields flared. Kale moved instantly, his body cutting through the chaos with terrifying precision. He fought not like a man, but like a storm condensed into flesh. Every strike was measured, deliberate, his silence speaking louder than shouts. He broke weapons with his hands, turned enemies against one another, and laughed once, a sound that shook even his allies. The laugh was not joy. It was thunder, a reminder that survival itself could be a weapon. An alien soldier cried out as Kale flung him aside. He fights like 10. Another answered, voice quivering. No, he fights like human. Blood stained the marble floor. Smoke filled the chamber, and still Kale pressed forward. His eyes locked on Tyron, who retreated behind his guard, his mask of calm cracking into fury. You think strength will save you? Tyron spat, voice rising above the clash. Even if you kill me, the poison spreads, not only in blood, but in trust. You cannot mend what I've broken. Kale advanced, boots striking like hammers. His voice was cold, relentless. Then we'll build something new, with duct tape if we have to. The phrase baffled the aliens, but it carried a weight they could not name. In the middle of battle, Kale laughed again, terrible and magnificent, and the sound drove fear deeper than any weapon could. The clash narrowed to two figures, Tyron with his polished cunning, Kale with his brutal certainty. Their duel was not of blades, but of wills, words and silence colliding in a storm. Tyron struck with rhetoric, trying to wound with doubt, demanding to know why Earth had hidden Kale away, why a soldier of such violence had been frozen in silence. And for the first time, Kale hesitated. His jaw tightened. His eyes, usually hard as stone, flickered with something unspoken. The question hung in the air like a blade, and even Viren, gasping on his throne, looked to Kale with desperate need for truth. But Kale did not answer. Instead, he smiled, faint and unreadable. That silence was louder than confession. Delegates who watched felt their skin crawl, for in his silence they saw a darkness too vast to name. Tyron pressed forward, sensing weakness. Yes, there is the truth. Even your own feared you, soldier. Even they cannot trust what you are. His voice dripped triumph, but it was brittle forced. Kale moved then, a blur of motion, his hand closing on Tyron's throat, slamming him back against the broken dais. His face was close, his voice low, each word carved into stone. Maybe they did fear me. Maybe they still should. But today, it is not me you need to fear. It is Earth. Because we never send armies first. We send one man. And if one is enough, what happens when we send more? The chamber froze. Tyron's eyes widened. His composure shattered. The words landed like prophecy, echoing through the hall until even the smoke seemed to still. Kale released him, letting the ambassador collapse. The fight was over, not because Tyron was dead, but because the council had seen him stripped of power. Delegates stared at Kale not as a soldier, but as something greater, something impossible to measure. Consul Viren, breath shallow but eyes burning, whispered, "One man changed the course of empires." And as the chamber trembled in silence, Kale turned, his laughter rolling once more, deep and thunderous. The sound was a verdict, a promise, a reminder of what humanity carried into the stars. And you, who listen, remember this. Lies can poison, power can corrupt, but truth, when carried with courage, becomes its own storm. Never fear the silence of those who endure, for silence is not absence, it is preparation. And when it breaks, the thunder it brings may change the world. Smoke clung to the rafters of the shattered council chamber, curling like prayers toward ceilings too high to care. The chaos had ended, yet silence felt heavier than battle. Broken banners hung limp, cracked tiles bore the stains of fear, and among the debris stood Kale Draven, scarred soldier, unwilling savior. His chest rose with steady breaths, his eyes calm but unreadable, as if the storm within him had not ended, but merely changed shape. Around him, delegates whispered in a dozen tongues, voices frayed between awe and terror. They had witnessed one man unravel lies and topple a conspiracy, yet none could decide whether he had saved them or warned them. Consul Viren, pale as moonlight and frail from the poison, still threading his veins, leaned against the carved throne that had nearly become his coffin. His words came soft but resolute, dripping with a diplomat's instinct even in weakness. "You have given us survival, Kale. But survival is not peace. Tell me, was this truly victory, or simply delay?" His tone sought harmony, but the tremor in his hand betrayed doubt. Kale's gaze lingered on the consul, unreadable, then shifted to the fragments of the black crystal shards scattered across the floor. His voice emerged deep and steady, as if weighed on ancient scales before release. "Victory doesn't exist. There's only what comes after. And what comes after is always the harder fight." Ambassador Tyron was gone. Whether slain in the chaos or fled into shadow, none could say. Yet his absence spoke louder than his words ever had. Trust was broken, treaties torn in spirit, if not in ink. The poison had spread exactly as he promised, not only through blood, but through the fragile bonds of diplomacy. Delegates argued in heated circles. Some demanded punishment, others demanded forgiveness, and many demanded nothing, too frightened to take a side. Kale stood apart, a figure of stone amid fire, his silence drawing more attention than speeches. His presence was proof that Earth had chosen not armies, but something far more dangerous, a single man, carrying secrets no one dared name. Later, in the consul's private chambers, the air thick with incense meant to mask the scent of sickness, Viren confronted him again. His voice was gentle, but his eyes searched with urgency. "Kale, I see it when you stand still, the shadow you carry. Why did Earth bury you in stasis? Why awaken you only now? What truth do you hold that even your own feared?" For a long while Kale said nothing. The silence was not hesitation, but calculation, as if he weighed the worth of truth against the cost of speaking it. Finally, his words came low, cold, and certain. "Because I don't know how to live in peace. They hoped time would teach me. It didn't. So they buried me, and prayed the galaxy would never need what I am again." The consul's expression softened, sorrow threading through his pain. "Perhaps peace is not the absence of men like you. Perhaps it is born because men like you stand watch, even when it breaks them." His hand trembled as he placed it lightly on Kale's arm. "You may not know peace, Kale, but you may guard it for others. That too is purpose." Kale did not reply. His eyes dropped to the consul's hand, then lifted back to the horizon beyond the chamber window. Stars burned there, cold and endless. His silence was both acceptance and refusal, both promise and denial. Days passed. Rumors spread faster than decrees. Whispers of duct tape holding assassins like iron. Stories of strange foods humans heated in glowing boxes and consumed with joy. Legends of a mythical warrior named Chuck Norris, whose feats, though incomprehensible, inspired dread in those who heard them. The galaxy had fought empires, endured plagues, survived tyrants, but now they spoke of one human whose laughter alone could shake walls. Fear shifted. It was no longer armies they dreaded, but unpredictability, the refusal of humans to fit into patterns. Kale became symbol and shadow. Some delegates sought his presence, convinced proximity meant safety. Others avoided him as though his silence was contagious. In every whisper, however, one truth echoed. One man had changed the course of empires. The council rebuilt itself with trembling hands, patching walls, but not trust. Viren's authority grew despite his frailty. Survival had given his words new weight. He leaned on Kale's presence, though never fully grasping the depth of what it cost him. In one quiet evening, Kale stood alone on the outer balcony. Alien suns dipped low, burning crimson across a horizon fractured by towers. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, half light, half shadow. He thought of Earth, of the vault where silence had been his prison, of the decision to awaken him now when diplomacy lay poisoned. Perhaps he was not the solution. Perhaps he was simply the warning. Behind him, Viren's voice broke the solitude. Will you return to stasis, Kale? Or will you remain among us? Kale's answer came without pause. You don't put thunder back into clouds once it's broken free. He turned then, his expression carved in certainty. I will not return. Whether you want me here or not, I am awake now, and the galaxy must live with that. The Consul nodded slowly, acceptance mingled with regret. Then may your storm guard us until peace can learn to walk again. Kale did not smile. He simply turned back to the horizon, the stars burning with indifferent beauty. His shoulders were heavy, not from defeat, but from the weight of endurance. And when night finally fell across the alien capital, Kale laughed once more. Low, thunderous, unrelenting, it rolled through streets and chambers, echoing off towers and walls, a sound that made even the stars seem to listen. Not joy, not madness, just the declaration that survival still stood. So remember this, listener. Wars may end, and treaties may rise, but survival is not granted. It is carved, tooth by tooth, from silence and shadow. Humanity does not endure because it is strongest or brightest, but because it refuses to remain buried. When storms come, do not curse the thunder. Learn from it. For thunder is only the sound of truth breaking free.